Good morning, friends. Women now have the ability to serve in combat zones and in special forces, but will they soon be part of the draft? The House Armed Services Committee has voted yes.
The case of NCFM versus Selective Service is a federal case filed by the National Coalition for Men on behalf of some of its members who are male and of draft age, and it challenges the Selective Services requirement that only men register for the draft. And the challenge is based on the equal protection clause of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution.
The New York Times reports a federal judge ruled that drafting only men for the military is
unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional.
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 Unconstitutional. The decision comes after the National Coalition for Men.
The National Coalition for Men.
The National Coalition for Men that argues that an all-male draft is fundamentally unfair to men.
We chose two members of NCFM who were of draft age to file the lawsuit on behalf of, and one was in San Diego, one was in Houston, Texas. That's how the case wound up in Houston. They're both young men who are concerned that they both did register, but they were concerned about the discrimination.
In a lawsuit claiming the male-only draft constitutes discrimination against men, NCFM's lawyer told PJ Media that even if the Selective Service system appeals, they are likely to lose again.
As the case law is very clear about sex discrimination is harmful per se.
Our military is made up of a volunteer force. Under the current Selective Service system, males between the ages of 18 and 25 are required to sign up for possible military service. Those who do not register could be denied federal employment and student loans.
It's not just that they have to register, they have to keep the government aware, updated on their whereabouts for about 8 years. They face fines, penalties, jail, even loss of federal jobs and loans and grants. And we've seen it happen. We know of one man who was jailed. We know of another who lost his federal job. And he had been homeless when he was of draft age. He got a job with the federal government, and years later, they fired him when they learned that he hadn't registered. So those aren't just fake threats, they're real. If you're being discriminated against, it's discrimination, and it needs to end. And it falls under the Equal Protection Clause, and it's unconstitutional. Now, it's true at that time, this was around 2013, it's true that it was allowing women in combat was still in a process, and it wasn't certain yet. So to some extent, it made sense to wait, but the judge ruled on the ground of ripeness that the whole thing should be thrown out. In any event, by the time we got to oral argument in the Ninth Circuit, it had been about a year or more, and changes had occurred even in that interim period. And in fact, strangely, just a few days before the oral argument, there was an announcement that women will now be allowed in all areas of combat.
The judge said women now serve in combat roles and can be no longer excluded. The last military draft was more than 40 years ago, but American men are still required to register when they turn 18.
We're happy with this, but of course there's a lot more work to do. This is just one area where men face systematic discrimination, and it's severely underaddressed by academia, media, and the government. So NCFM, what we've done so far has been all as volunteers, and we've made tremendous impact just with that capacity. And these lawsuits aren't all we're doing. We're pursuing funding so that we can do more of these kind of lawsuits and impact litigation, but also do legislative work, like tracking the bills that are introduced every year. There are tons of them that affect men in different ways, in domestic violence, in due process, in child custody issues, and there's nobody on our side that on a professional basis is tracking them. We do it on a volunteer basis as much as we can, but if we had the funding, we could track them. Even at the federal level, we could do that, and in different states, and even counties and cities. There's so much more that we could do with the right amount of funding. And it wouldn't just be lawsuits. So, and this is the kind of work we want to do. On my end, I want to do the legal work and maybe legislative as well. But there's lots of work to do. And we're the ones who can do it because we've been doing it on a volunteer basis for decades. And we're not going to stop. but we could sure use the funds to do a lot more than we're doing.